Hello, my name is John Sayre and I'm the UK and Africa Sales Manager for Segal. Today I'm going to talk to you about cost reduction by extended use of digitalization and remote operation within oil and gas. We are all on a journey towards digitalization, whether that be by hook or by crook. This is driven by the need for collaboration, advancements in technology, or remote working requirements. According to McKinsey in July of 2020, COVID-19 has propelled a rapid migration to digital technologies across all industries and sectors, driven by new customer behaviors, unpredictable demands, and the need for remote working. If we apply this to the oil and gas markets, which we know well, arguably many of us are on this journey already and have begun to set out our own roadmaps to digitalization. Perhaps we have digitalization officers within our companies interweaving this with our company strategy. The drivers are largely the same in oil and gas as they are across all industries and sectors. They're driven by technology megatrends such as aligning to the latest software architectures, the strive for efficiency, and ultimately agility to unpredictable demands. However, the modern workforce is also cementing the drive for digital workplaces. In modern day life, we interact with digital technology on a daily, if not hourly, basis. However, when we walk into our offices, my background is as a geologist, it's easy for me to feel that I'm walking into yesterday's world, with workstations under the desk, data siloed on servers, and software still delivered to me via a dongle. Ultimately, the journey to digitalization is inevitable, but the key component here is the pathway on how to get there. If we recognize the benefits of digitalization, why are we not doing this already? Largely, there is a broad consensus on what the end state will look like, or certainly the form it will take. The fundamental question is therefore not one of where we are going, but how we are going to get there. What is the pathway to digitalization? If we think of this as a pathway, we can see commonality in the barriers on this journey. Perhaps we can consider these as junctions or decision gates on that pathway. But in turn, we also recognize that there are multiple pathways to the same destination, and that perhaps this shouldn't be such a big concern. If we think first of all about risk, we know risk very well in oil and gas. We work with risk every day. However, we seem to interpret digitalization risks as one of being the fear of making the wrong decision. Which cloud, which data platform, which software? What if that doesn't matter? Effectively, these choices don't dictate the future pathway, or certainly do not have a fundamental bearing on that pathway. The risk, therefore, is the future itself and not adapting. The technology ultimately has no bearing on the end goal. If we think about legacy systems and perhaps our reliance on these legacy systems, if you believe that everything I've said up until this point, the digital journey being inevitable, then many legacy systems are archaic, they may be broken, and perhaps the business models are somewhat outdated. But recognizing also that we need these legacy systems today and that change cannot happen overnight. However, I would like you to think about this. What if it doesn't matter? What if your current and future state look very similar? What if these are all part of the same challenge and that technology can be regarded as transient as we know it is? Then the mode by which you get there can be changeable, and ultimately it's the operation and not the technology that needs to be considered. Functional challenges. If digitalization really removes functional challenges, data silos, personnel location limitations, and allows the integration of global expertise and services, you can ultimately lay the foundations for business change to happen and overcome these challenges with smarter ways of working. And finally, we must always talk about cost. Perhaps it's a cost versus value argument. Many people say, I know the cost of everything and the value of nothing. However, looking at this in another way, data is now an asset on our balance sheet. It's something that we should build expertise around, we should build operations around, and we should build efficiency around. You wouldn't put an oil rig in the North Sea and not build an operation around it. So you need to be thinking in this context around data and your systems. Segal can ultimately overcome these barriers, and we have a vehicle to navigate this pathway. We call this GeoCloud. So what is GeoCloud? Well, GeoCloud is a vendor-agnostic platform that provides integration of your current and future technology to give you a robust, scalable, and open solution. Breaking it down into constituent parts, GeoCloud is fully integratable with your current application suite. We're not vendor specific, so we have about 1,500 applications running in GeoCloud currently. We can integrate with new and modern applications. I'm looking at microservices here, the latest innovations in software as a service and OSDU. If we think about data platforms, we're supporting the integration, use, and deployment of these data platforms to ultimately liberate your data. If we think about smarter and flexible ways of working, we've talked a lot about mobility and the need for a new and modern workforce that is used to interacting with digital technology. When we talk about scalability, we want a system that is reactive to the demands of our business. So it's efficient, it's highly available, and it provides the necessary redundancy for our operation. Ultimately, we want openness. So we want to be able to consume services and the latest technology from multiple vendors. So ultimately, GeoCloud is providing us the vehicle to realize our digitalization dreams, but provides the integration mechanism for these technologies and services. If we expand on the 4 barriers I set out at the start of this presentation, now within the context of GeoCloud, I'm hoping it will become apparent to you as to why GeoCloud is essential for navigating this pathway to digitalization. GeoCloud is often referred to as being vendor agnostic, but we could think of this as being technology agnostic. If the technology used today has no bearing on the technology you may want to use in the future, what is the risk? As a geologist, this is music to my ears. I want to realize the value of the latest technology and methods to be faster than my competitors at finding oil, but I also trust the technology I use today, and if I can use both instead of choosing one or the other, I'm effectively retrofitting what I have today to the future. I have an analogy for this. I like cake, so naturally I'm going to choose a cake analogy. But if you think of software and technologies as the icing on the cake, this icing can take many forms, it can take many flavors and colors and patterns, and these change over time, a lot like technology according to the fashions, or we could think of fashion as being the latest innovation. But ultimately, beneath that icing, you have jam, cream, and sponge. That foundation is consistent, it's robust, and it's stood the test of time. So I'm not saying digitalization is a piece of cake, but perhaps it's a lot easier with the correct vendor, the correct product, but ultimately a solid agnostic foundation. Throughout, we have recognized that the future has both been identified as a fundamental risk, but perhaps one that can be easily mitigated. Perhaps the bigger risk is not recognizing the end state and sitting back and doing nothing. If market volatility in oil and gas, COVID-19, and wider geopolitical risk in general has shown us anything, it's that our business ideas, methods of working, and adoption of technology are often driven by reactive engagement rather than proactive foresight. We often treat the symptom and not the cause. In the context of GeoCloud, we want a technology that can flex and alter its state based on the demands of our business. We don't want to flex our business and operations to mitigate a symptom. So if I take this in the context of GeoCloud, we need to select the cloud that can provide the foundation for digitalization. We need the link between the domain and the data, which ultimately comes through the software component that Sigal can provide. We can make the digital happen with our expertise and our consultants, but ultimately we need to bring this all together in one workspace and have a connection point for this technology and services. Ultimately, the solution here is GeoCloud. I've talked about risk in terms of the future and ultimately recognizing what the end state looks like, and I've also talked about our reliance and integration of legacy systems. But I want to give you an example of functional challenges that solidify the value of GeoCloud today. If we consider the Internet of Things, integrating multiple data sources to a vendor-agnostic platform is hugely important. Bringing this data to a central location is key for performing analytics and understanding what all these sensors are telling us. If we ultimately want to deploy a data platform and realize the true potential of data liberation, we need a solid foundation to be able to do that. If we, I've already mentioned legacy systems, but mentioning them again, we're not starting from a blank canvas. So the business ultimately has to have an eye on the future, but a firm eye on the present, and recognizes that these systems are still integral to our operation today. They may not be in the future, but we still need to rely upon them today. And finally, I don't think we've even begun to realize the potential in AI and machine learning. But we do need to have a solid foundation to build from if we want to recognize and realize the potential in this. Ultimately, all of this is brought together in GeoCloud. So up until this point, I've talked about risk in terms of the future, but ultimately recognizing the end state is something that we accept and can be on board with. We've talked about the reliance and integration of legacy systems because ultimately we don't have a blank canvas and we need to start from somewhere and recognize where we're going. And finally, I talked about, current developments in technology, the Internet of Things, data platforms, and showed how that they are integratable to GeoCloud to ultimately realize our digitalization dreams. But we have to recognize that there is a cost to doing this, and I don't think it's simply X is cheaper than Y. Value is often found in how prepared we are for the issues we didn't see coming rather than those which are predictable. Recent data from McKinsey in May 2020 has shown that in response to COVID-19, we have vaulted the equivalent of 5 years in merely 8 weeks in terms of our adoption of digital technologies. The question I would ask then to everyone watching this is, have we ultimately selected the right pathway, the most efficient pathway, or is this another example of us treating the symptom and not the cause? If you recognize and understand everything that I've just said and can relate to this, perhaps now it's time to have a trusted partner with the right vehicle to navigate the pathway to digitalization. Of course, I call that GeoCloud, but I think Segal's track record speaks for itself in this space. We have 130 plus E&P customers. That translates to 13,500 users supported from 9 locations across the globe. And we are ultimately scoring consistently 5 out of 6 in customer satisfaction surveys. So in conclusion, Bob Dylan said in 1964, "The times they are a-changing." That remains as relevant today, if not more so today than it did in 1964. The only certainty we have in our business is change, and we need to be prepared for that. So come on this inevitable journey with Segal. We're the safe option to navigate this pathway, and Segal will get you there.